Well, hello, and hope you're doing all right. Every day it's like another chapter, isn't it, in some weird dystopian science fiction novel. But we won't dwell on any of this because you're probably here for a bit of a distraction to the real world. So let's crack on and I'll tell you what I've been doing. Right, so here's the body, finished off now. All of the sides have been bound in maple. Use some of that green veneer that I mentioned earlier. Really pleased with the way it's turned out. A little bit tricky with these extreme curves for the bends, and of course you have to mitre the maple to get it really spot on. You don't want any gaps there. So with that done, the next job is to fit the neck on, and I always glue my necks on. I don't see there's any place for bolt-on necks in my world, so that's the next job. Fix these two together. So there's the socket that the neck's going to fit in. That's been done with a router template follower. Now my rule is that I don't touch this. That's as good as it's going to get, so any adjustment is done on the tenon of the neck. If you remember, I said I wanted to leave all of this square, and by leaving it square, what that's going to enable me to do is mark this out really accurately, and also I'll be able to do some of the cuts on the bandsaw. So that's the first step. That's the length of the tenon. I've taken this surface back at 5 degrees, and then this bottom edge is at 90 degrees to that surface. So you can see that what I've got now is my pitch of the neck. So what I'm going to do next is to cut the tenon, and I can do that on the bandsaw because everything's going to sit flat and square. I saw down here, so this portion comes away. Saw down there, this portion comes away. I've saw across the back there, that bit comes off, and then you're left with the tenon. So with that tenon cut on the bandsaw, the shoulders cut by hand, what I'm going to do now is really file this tenon until the neck fits and it's in alignment. So that will take a while, so off we go. And it really is a question of taking a bit off and then checking to see whether or not everything lines up. So a few hours later, the neck is now fitting. Obviously you've got the alignment running down the imaginary centre line of the instrument. You've got the pitch of the neck, and of course you've got to look at these shoulders so that you haven't got any gaps there. The only other thing I want to point out is that I always leave a bit of a gap here at the front of the tenon, and I'll tell you why in a second. So the neck, as you can see, is quite a tight fit, and what I've found over recent years, because these joints have been getting better, is that if I use tight bond to stick the neck on, because it contains moisture, you put the adhesive on, put the tight bond on, and the moisture in the tight bond swells up the wood, and before you can push the neck home, it tends to lock up because it's swollen. So instead of using tight bond these days, I use epoxy resin. And if anything, the epoxy kind of almost acts like a lubricant. It helps it slide in there. Now, I said I left a little bit of a gap at the front there. As you know, basic physics, you can't compress a liquid. So the idea of the little bit of a gap there at the front is that when I push this down and in, the excess epoxy has actually got somewhere to go. It's a kind of escape route for the excess epoxy. Otherwise, again, it's not going to go right away home. And then that little gap at the front there, I'll just put a veneer shim in later on, just for the sake of neatness. And the other thing is, of course, as you well know, you never get a good glue joint end grain to end grain, so that part of the joint wouldn't do an awful lot anyway. So yeah, gluing that on now with the epoxy resin. You can see how easy that slides in. So easy. So, tight bond. I'll be panicking now. Yep, spot on. I suppose what I should have said is that one of the reasons that I have problems with the tight bond locking up is because I don't use any clamps. I guess if I forced it in with a G-clamp it wouldn't be an issue, but I don't need them. So there you go, leave that there. Let gravity do the work for us. Done. Go and have some lunch. Well, I've always been a bit of a belt and braces man, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill into where the neck joint is and insert some dowels, and they will just lock that joint in place. Not that I really think it's ever going to move as is, but as I say, just better safe than sorry. We are. And into those holes now. So into these holes we'll glue the dowels, and as I say, that locks everything up nicely. Right, okay, there you go. That neck then is firmly glued onto the body using the tenon and the 4 dowels to lock it all in place. So we've got this incredibly rigid joint, and you know, I'm a firm believer in the rigidity of a neck joint insofar as I believe that it enhances the tone, the sustain and the overall volume of the instrument. So that's done. Pleased with the way that that's turned out. The next job that I'll be doing later on today is to glue the fretboard on. And of course the fretboard also helps tie all of this together. So in the meantime, again, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Make sure you keep safe, won't you? So the UK government yesterday announced 100,000 deaths of COVID. I mean, absolutely devastating news, really, and so sad for all of those losses. So it's imperative you take care, you keep safe, and we'll see you in the next video. So thanks again. You take care. Bye bye.